what atheists wish Christians knew about them. It was going to be a top 10 list, and I ended up with 11, so forgive me. All right. Number 1, can you read that? We have morals too. Believe it or not, this is one of the most common, one of the most frequent things that we have to deal with, and that is that people who the rest of the day have been nice to us, when they find out all of a sudden that we're atheists, all of a sudden they assume we must be awful people. One of the running jokes among atheists is that people think we must eat our young. You know, so there's this meme that passed around where a guy's got a baby on a sandwich. But that's a very prejudiced thing, and I understand why folks think that. Folks tend to think that someone who is not from their own tradition must have very, very different values. But if you talk to them, you'll find out they actually probably believe a lot of the same things you do on most day-to-day issues. The folks that I know who are atheists, and I've gotten to know several hundred at this point, either virtually or in person, and at this point, I think I can speak with some authority about what the issues are. And the number one thing that always comes up is they think we have no morals. They assume that there's no ethical system for an atheist. If you don't believe in God, how can you possibly believe in morals of any kind? The short answer is you can. And all of the atheists that I know are very principled people. They have very strong principles. And I don't want to go into too much more detail than that, except to say that there's an implicit judgment there that says that somehow because you're from a different worldview, you must not be able to have an ethical system. But in reality, this judgment doesn't come from actual experience with people like me. It's not that someone observes my behavior and says, I see that you're an immoral person. It's more that there's an ideological belief from the very beginning, before they know anything about you, that you must be an ethicless person. That's probably not a word, but anyway, so that's the first thing. It's the number one thing that always comes up in everybody's list. Number 2, you don't know us better than we know ourselves. And one of the things that comes up a lot is that people seem to think they can tell me what's going on inside of me better than I can. And that's why a moment like this is really important, to take time to actually ask questions and to listen to me tell my story and tell you that there's probably some misconceptions that some folks have. And I talk with people online a lot, and they often will tell me, well, here's what's really happening to you. Surely that would insult you as well. If somebody says, well, see, I know better than you do. It's different, though, if it's somebody that lives with you, it's your parents or a spouse or a best friend of 20 years. They may tell you something about you that you didn't know. Everybody has their blind spots, right? But I'm talking about complete strangers, assuming they know everything that they could possibly know about you, and they know more than you about you. And they say, let me tell you what's really happening to you. And that's insulting. So try to avoid doing that when you're talking to someone in a position like mine. Next. We don't, deep down, believe in God. We don't. That comes up a lot. I said your particular God because there's always an assumption that whichever God you believe in must be the only one worth looking into. But I've actually gotten to talk with a lot of other people who are Muslims, who are Hindus, who are Buddhists. Buddhists don't technically believe in a God most of the time, but there's a lot of different faiths out there. And if you interact with many of them, you'll find out that a lot of them seem to assume also that you're supposed to be believing in theirs. And anybody who doesn't believe in a God is rejecting their particular God. And deep down, what comes up a lot is I'm told, you must really deep down believe in God, and you're just lying to yourself. And that goes back up to number 2. But also, I just need to tell you, I really don't. It's not like I'm pretending. It is possible to believe at one point and not believe later. So you'll just have to take my word for it. We're not lying about that. Next. We don't hate your particular God. I would say just God, except again, I've had to interact with folks who believe in multiple gods. But to assume that non-belief means you hate something, that doesn't even make any sense. Because I also don't believe in Allah. Do you believe in Allah?
Actually, Allah's the word for God, so yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, that depends on how you define it, because I have a feeling the Muslim friends might not say the same thing. Do you believe in Zeus?
No.
No. Why do you hate Zeus? That is one of the most frequent questions I get when I talk to people online and they find out that I'm an atheist. They say, why do you hate God? And again, back to number 3. You don't understand. I really don't believe. I mean, I understand that you feel that's a bad thing, and I know But just, number one, give me the basic respect of believing me when I say I really don't believe. And then number two, don't assume that that means I am being rebellious against one particular God or another. Because how many gods do you not believe in? And why do you hate them all? You know, that doesn't make any sense. So just think about that a little bit. We don't all disbelieve because something bad happened to us. And one of y'all has probably already written that question down. What happened to you? My experience was positive. I actually had a good time. There are other reasons, and they weren't because something bad happened to me. For me, it was mostly a rational process. But there's an assumption among many people that the only reason somebody could go from believing to not believing is if something tragic has happened to them. And it's probably because you've seen that happen to somebody. You've seen their faith be rattled and shaken by something difficult happening to them. But it's an overly simplifying thing to assume that the only reason people would disbelieve is because something bad has happened to them. And do you also understand that there's an implicit insult in that? Because what you're saying is the only reason you could not believe in the same thing I believe in is something's broken. Something's wrong with you. You have a major, major flaw. So there must be damage of some sort. You know, what was it? What was it that messed you up? Do you hear the insult in that? So try not to talk that way to people who don't share your faith. Because first of all, it doesn't, not only is it insulting, but it doesn't match most people's lives. I have met some people over the last couple of years that do disbelieve, at least in part, because bad things happen to them that cause them to question their faith. But it's not really fair to oversimplify things that way. And if you talk to enough people like me, you'll find out that many of us didn't have anything bad happen to us until after we left the faith, at which point sometimes there's some harsh social repercussions. You just have to take my word for it. Believing isn't a choice. Now, you may disagree with me on this, but let me just try to hash this out for just a second. Belief is an involuntary response to something that you've learned or something that you've experienced. You can say that you chose to believe something, but let me ask you a couple of questions. Number one, do you remember the day you chose to believe that there is such a thing as a God? Most people, if they thought about it, would say, well, I remember a day when I chose to become a Christian. I remember when I prayed or was baptized, or there was an experience of some sort. But for most folks, they'd have to say, well, pretty much I was taught from the time I was able to even speak that there was a God. It was just something I always was taught, and my whole surrounding culture taught me to believe that. So it wasn't really so much something I decided one day I'm going to believe in God. Well, that's actually the way it happened for me. For me, things lined up in such a way that I just realized I didn't believe anymore. And that's the way it happens for most people that I know who are atheists. And by the way, I belong to a group of about nearly 300 folks who live in Mississippi who are atheists, and most of them, like me, are at least partially closeted because of fear of social repercussions. Because around here, if you tell people you're not a Christian, especially if you tell them that you don't even believe in God at all, they immediately assume, oh, wow, that's a dangerous person. I don't need to be around that person, because who knows what they're going to do. They're going to steal my pocketbook. You know, people assume we beat puppies, you know, and sacrifice things to something. I'm not sure what. So believing is not a choice. Do you know this painting? This is one of my favorite Norman Rockwell paintings. I love Norman Rockwell. I believe it's called The Discovery or something like that. If you look at it long enough, you can see what it is he's got. He's just made a discovery. And of course, I've had a lot of fun over the years trying to decide, is he shocked because he's just figured out the truth? Or is he shocked because he thinks now that his dad is Santa Claus? Either one would be equally shocking. But in his case, and in my case, there came a day where something was just discovered. And a belief changed. I remember there was a bag, a duffel bag, in my closet. Not my closet, it was in a bathroom closet that I found one day when I was, 6 or 7 years old. And it had initials on it, and I thought that was kind of cool, and I thought, I'd like that duffel bag. I could use that for soccer. But I left it in there because I didn't think it was mine. And then a couple of weeks later, on Christmas morning, all the Santa Claus gifts were out on the couch, and there was that bag. And I said, wait a second. Something's going on here. Sometimes you just sort of learn something, and it changes what you believe. It's not a choice. You just suddenly think differently about something. And you can't choose to go back and believe again in something that you now don't believe in anymore. So it's oversimplifying. It's oversimplifying to just say, well, it's just a choice, and you just need to choose to go back again. Number 7, most of us, at least around here, used to be Christians too. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. In our case, the problem is not that I have not heard the story right. It's not that the Christian message has not gotten to me and it just needs to be retold one more time. Or maybe if you just come to our church, you've been to 40, you've spoken at them. I mean, I've led small groups. I've led some big groups. I've been in ministry before. It's not a new story to me. So for people like me, it's not just a matter of exposing us to something we haven't heard. Many of us have been Christians too. So you don't have to just go through and tell us all the same things again. Get to know us and what our issues are and befriend us, you know? Next. Quoting the Bible doesn't work like a Jedi mind trick. I don't know if you've had this done to you, but there are some people who, when they want to make a point, instead of saying what they think about something, they get this kind of glassy-eyed stare, and then they quote a Bible verse. And that's great, and I could quote them too. Like I said, I've studied the Bible quite a bit, probably more than most of you, I would bet. One of my students in history class one day said something like, Mr. Carter, why do you know so much about the Bible? And I said, well, I have a degree in it. And they said, is that like a belt? And I said, yes, that's right. I have a black belt in karate. I mean, in Bible. And, anyway, I've had many people do this where they think maybe if I just say the words again, something's going to happen to them. But it's not a magic trick. Learn to converse and have a real conversation with somebody about what it is you want to talk to them about, instead of just quoting Bible verses. Maybe you people don't do that. But I've met a lot of folks that just seem like they can't talk without just quoting Bible verses. So try to maybe get outside of that. We don't worship the devil. We really don't, because we don't believe in the devil. If we don't believe in God, why would we believe in a devil? So no, don't picture that atheists, what do we do when we get together? Well, does that mean, do we get together in a circle and make pentagrams on the floor and kill cats? You know, you might like that. There might be a couple of people who want to do that. You're a dog family then, right? All right. Anyway, so we don't worship the devil. In fact, to us, the idea of the devil is kind of silly. In fact, I would, if we wanted to make an argument about it, I think people tend to ascribe more power and authority to the devil when they talk about the devil than they do about God. There's all kinds of things God won't do and can't do, but the devil can just do anything he wants. So to many of us, the concept even doesn't make sense. So no, we don't worship the devil. Last 2. Hell doesn't scare us because to us it doesn't even make sense. And many people don't understand that. When they're talking to me and they think, but aren't you afraid that you're going to burn forever in hell? No, not really. Because it doesn't make sense to me. And I could talk about why it doesn't make sense, but again, this isn't a debate setting, so I'd rather not do that anyway. But that would be good to know. And I've had a number of well-meaning people think and tell me, you know, maybe if you just think about the fact you're going to burn forever. And I'm thinking, really, this is not the best way to approach this subject. Okay, finally, not all of us are anti-theists. By that I mean, not everybody who doesn't believe in God thinks that it's their job to get onto you for believing in God. Personally, I don't like that at all. I think there's a lot of good that can be done in the world from people cooperating with one another, regardless of a difference of beliefs. But there are people out there who believe that the stuff you do that's good for the world is wasted unless it's done in the right belief system. Are you familiar with this? And it's really frustrating because there's a lot of things that could be done in the world that would be actually helpful for people than trying to fight over what it is that you believe. And not everybody who doesn't believe in God is an anti-theist. Many people are just what you would call an agnostic, and in some ways I am that too. I simply would say, I just don't really have sufficient reason anymore to believe in one God or another. That doesn't mean I'm going to get onto you or think less of you because you do. And there are people out there who are anti-theists. There are people, some of them in public limelight, who feel that it's their job to attack religion in general and Christianity in particular. And I don't really identify with those people myself. I would say I'm not an anti-theist. I would say that personally, I'm an anti-fundamentalist. And by that I mean, I believe that there are forms of the Christian faith which are harmful to the people who hold them and to everyone else. And there are better forms of it that are better for the people who hold them and for the rest of the world. And I would want to encourage anybody who's a member of the Christian faith to find those aspects of the Christian faith that are more positive, that help for making better relationships with people, and they're not about excluding other people. And even the word atheist is an exclusionary word. It's a marginalizing word. It's the only thing I don't really like about it, because it describes me in terms of what somebody else believes. So it's true that I am one of those, but at the same time, there's other ways of thinking about who I am. I'm also a person, so get to know me that way.
You know, I can say that you've been very, very consistent, at least in our conversations, and that's one of the things I've been very appreciative of, is that you haven't tried to ridicule my faith, or we haven't even gone there. You know, you're trying to win me over either.
There's no need.
We've been able to talk about common struggles, and that's been really helpful to me.